Hello my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today I've got another book talk video to share with you guys. And today we are talking about I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. This book was originally published in 1995 in French, and it wasn't until 2018 that it was published in English. And over the past year, I've heard a lot of people talking about this book. I've seen it all over Goodreads, on BookTube, and I was so curious to finally get to read it. So I actually had somebody sent it to me. I put it on my Amazon wish list, and just a couple days after I put it on there, somebody sent it to me, and they were like, yeah, you need to read this. So I was very happy to receive it, so thank you. First of all, let me just start off by saying that this is without a doubt one of my favorite reads of 2024 so far. Top 3 for sure. Basically, what we have here is the story of 40 women. Well, at the beginning, it's 39 women and one young girl who are trapped in an underground bunker, like literally locked in a cage. When the book kind of picks up, we know that it's being written by the main character as a memoir in the future, and she is telling her story to us. So when the story picks up, she is 14 years old, 14 or 15, she's not entirely sure. All she knows is that she's been in this bunker for as long as she can remember. She has no memories of life before it. All the other 39 women, they were older when they got taken, but their memories are fading. And they're given drugs, and they're thinking that the drugs are like causing their memories to fade. There are guards that pace outside of their cage 24 hours a day. There's always 3 of them at a time. 3 men, and they have never spoken to these women. When they first got in there, the women would try to speak to them, try to elicit a response out of them, but there'd be nothing. They would get nothing in return. So eventually they stopped. These men put food in twice a day, and other than that, they are just pacing back and forth. So while nobody knows exactly how long they've been in there, like I said, the main character, who has no name, the other women just referred to her as the child. She was very young when she got in there, and she's now 14 or 15. So we're thinking like 12 years maybe. All of a sudden one day, an alarm goes off while one of the guards is opening the little hatch in the cage to put the food through. So he's unlocking the hatch to put the food through. The alarm goes off, and the guards immediately run. And the keys are left in the hatch. And they're all kind of like, what? Because these men are gone. They're gone. So after a few minutes, the child goes over and she takes the keys out. And she's like, she's small, so she's able to get through the hatch. She gets out, she unlocks the gate and swings open the door. And all 39 of the women are just kind of standing there in awe. And eventually they get up the courage to walk out of the cell. They find a staircase and they go up out into the world. And that's what happens next. So that's the basic premise, is these women who have been locked up for many years, don't have many memories of the time before, are now about to walk out into the world, unsure of what they'll see, terrified that the guards might still be around. And then from there we get their story as they go out and try to see what's out there. And that's all I'll tell you before I get into the spoilers. This book was outside of genre, outside of so many things. I guess I would call it maybe speculative, dystopian. If you don't like books that leave you with more questions than answers, this is not the book for you. Because we're being told the story from one of the women, the child, as her name is. So we only know what she knows, and she doesn't know much. Because unlike the others, she doesn't even have a frame of reference. The others, they knew who they were before, like they were mothers or cashiers. One was studying to be a nurse. They have a frame of reference for who they were in society. The child knows none of that. So this story is told from her point of view. So if you don't like a book that doesn't, if you don't like a book that leaves you, like I said, with more questions than answers, this is not the one. But if you like a book that looks at themes of loneliness and desperation and love and family and what it means to be a human, what it means to be a human, like it's I'm literally speechless. It's short. It's only like 180 pages. It's not a feel-good story. If you're looking for that, this isn't it. But it's so intriguing. It's fascinating. The writing is incredible. Incredible. I'm going to read you some passages when we get into the spoiler section. It's just so good. It's beautifully written. It will make you think, I know this is going to stay with me for a long time. There was especially a few parts towards the end that I had a ball of anxiety in my throat the entire time I was reading. I was so scared, isn't the word. I was so nervous. I who have never known men. What a title. What a story. What an author. I've never heard of her before now. I need to look and see what else she's written. Okay. If you don't want any spoilers, you know the drill. It's time to skedaddle. So now that they're gone, we can get into it. So like I said, at the beginning, they're in the bunkers. The child, she's very curious about life before the bunker. She's always asking questions. The older women are like, listen, what do you care? You're never gonna experience these things. Like even if we tell you, it'll mean nothing to you. You'll have no frame of reference. And she gets really frustrated. She spends a lot of time angry at these women who treat her like a child, even though she is. And like as she gets older, she's a teenager now. She has questions about like women and men and where children come from and pleasure and things like that. And the close friend that she eventually makes, a woman named Anthena, is like, listen, honestly, telling you these things will only make you long for them, and this is our life now. That's it. So eventually she's like, okay. So over time, like they teach her basic math and like her letters and things like that. And she learns to sew, and she starts to want to try to keep time inside the bunker, because the way the guards come and go and the way they're only fed twice, and then it's daytime and then it's sleep time, they start to think that they're not living in a 24-hour clock anymore. And so the child, she learns from her friend, Anthena, who was the one studying to be a nurse, about the average beats per minute of her heart. And so she starts to keep track of the time by counting her heartbeats. And through trial and error and over a few days and weeks, she discovers that they're living within a 16-hour day. And they can't figure out why their days are being like structured like this. And the whole time they're in there, like, they're being kept alive, they're being fed, they're being clothed, they have plenty of soap so they can wash themselves and keep themselves clean. If they get sick, the guards administer medication. So they know that they're being kept alive for a reason, and that they feel like at some point there's going to be a use for them, which is a terrifying thought, but they can't figure out what it is. And as time goes by, like, they start throwing out different theories, and one girl's like, what if we're not even on Earth anymore? What if this is a different planet? Anyway, so time passes. The siren goes off. They get out of the bunker. They go up this huge flight of stairs. Before they do, they see that, like, the guards' quarters, there's fridges and freezers, and there's years worth of food. Years, if not more. So anyway, they go up. There's no sign of anyone. All of the men are gone. The guards gone. There's no sign of them. And they're on a plain, like flat land. And they can't see anyone. Even though it's only been 11 minutes from the time the alarm went off to the time they emerge upstairs. There's no sign. And they're kind of looking around, and one of the women, she's like, this isn't the country I grew up in, because this is all flat. My country was full of hills. Everywhere you looked, hills. So they have no idea where they are. So they don't know why they were taken and caged, and they don't know where they are. And those are two things that they never find out. We never find out. So if that's going to bother you, don't read this book. So they start walking. They fill up it with as much supplies as they can. They start walking. They find a place to sort of, set up camp. And then a few of the braver ones go back. Because at first they're scared, like, what if we go back and the guards are there? But they get over that fear after a while because there is no one around. No one. They go get supplies, bring it up. They're going back and forth. After a few days, they start trekking again. And eventually, they come upon another bunker. And they're like, what the hell? So they go, the doors were open because whoever was in there, the men, they fled. And at this point, it's been quite a while. Like, I'm thinking almost 2 months of walking. Well, of being set up at the first camp and then walking. So they go downstairs. Again, it's fridges, cupboards full of years worth of food. And then they go in a little deeper and they see a replica cage of theirs. Only in this one, all the women are dead. And of course, this is a very upsetting sight to come upon, and they're very shook by it. And, they're all kind of meditating on the sheer luck that key had been in the hatch for them when the alarm went off. They take more supplies, they carry on, they come across another bunker finally. They go down, but this one is full of men that are dead in the cage. So that's when we learn, okay, it wasn't just women they were caging. Clearly it's also men. And again, 40. So they keep going. Time starts going quickly then in the memoir. We're kind of plowing through it. Years are passing. Eventually, some of the older members of the group start to die. And they start to rig up a system because the second woman that dies, the nurse thinks she has a form of cancer in her reproductive organs. And one night when they're all sleeping, this woman is in terrible pain. And no one knows what to do to help her. One night they wake up in the morning and she's gone. And they find her in a nearby bunker, having had taken her own life. And Anthena, the child's friend, is very disturbed by this. She was like, no, she should not have had to go off and die alone. We can't let that happen again. From here on out, if somebody needs to go, we need to help them. And Anthena's like, but I don't know if I'll be able to, if I would have the strength to. And the child is like, you know what, I'll do it. Teach me how to do it and I will do it. Because the child, who, is now getting older and older, she's different than the rest of them. She doesn't have that sort of human connection, I guess, that comes from growing up in society, I guess. And she's like, whatever it is that makes you fully human, it's missing in me. So Anthena teaches her like where the heart is and how to plunge a sharpened knife into it for anyone that needs it. And as time goes on, that becomes a very valuable skill, and she's able to help escort many of these women out of their suffering when their time comes. And those scenes are actually really beautiful when she would take the women, because at this point they've set up camp and they've built like a little village with houses, and the child has learned that she's really good at woodworking, like building and construction. So she's made like a bunch of little houses. And so she takes them into a cabin, and, you know, they always smile at her as she's getting ready to put them out of their suffering, or she, you know, they express their love for her. And they're beautiful scenes. They're beautiful scenes. So they're traveling bunker after bunker. They're coming across men, women. There's one part where, this is nearing the end, where she comes across a bunker of men. Let me read it to you, if you don't mind. And when she's in there, in most of the bunkers, when she finds the corpses in the cages, they're all kind of piled together, clawing at the locks. But she goes down in one of them, and there's a man, and he's like, he knew his time was coming, and he sat back away from all the others, and he's put mattresses up on either side of him to sort of prop him up. And she says this: his torso was half clothed in a torn tunic. I could see the powerful bones of a shoulder that must have been strong. I felt a surge of grief, I, who had never known men, as I stood in front of this man who had wanted to overcome fear and despair, to enter eternity upright and furious. I sighed and left. I climbed back up slowly because I felt a strange nostalgia calling me back. I would never go down into this bunker again. Oh, I would see 100 others. There were so many of them, but in this one, where I had so often come for supplies, I'd never taken the trouble to look at the withered corpses. And now one of them affected me. I hadn't noticed him among his companions, and when I finally did see him, I was about to leave. In another life, I might have met him. He wasn't very old. He could have been a friend of my father's, or my father himself, since I definitely had to have had a father, or even a lover. But all I knew of him was his intention to die with dignity, sitting erect, apart from the others, away from the pushing and shoving, the fears and cries in which the others were enmeshed. He was a loner like me, a proud man, and I was leaving knowing nothing of him other than his final plan. But that at least he had achieved. He'd wanted to face his destiny to the last, and now someone knew it. As long as I lived, my memory of him would live too. There would be a witness to his pride and solitude. I stopped, hesitated for a moment, then went back down to gaze at him for a long time. There was nothing new to be discovered on his parchment face. I felt a profound sadness. I told myself that was perhaps how, in the time of humans, people say goodbye to the body of a cherished lover, by trying to engrave them in their memory. I knew nothing about him, but I knew nothing about myself either, except that one day I too would die, and that, like him, I would prop myself up and remain upright, looking straight ahead until the last. And when death triumphed over my gaze, I would be like a proud monument raised with hatred in the face of silence. And there are just so many good quotes. There are so many good quotes in here. So anyway, bunker after bunker. Eventually, her dearest Anthena dies, and the child, who's now well into her 20s, she has an aversion to physical touch. It repulses her. But when Anthena is dying, she asks her to hold her. And the child's like, if she's asking me to do this, she must desperately need it. And so she does. She wraps her arms around her and holds her until she's gone. And then finally the last few of them die, and the child is left alone. And she's kind of excited by the idea that she can now kind of go off and explore more. She had wanted to, but since the others had all been so much older than her, they had all gotten to the point where they were aging or getting ill, and she had felt kind of that she had no choice but to hunker down and stay there until they were gone. And now they are. and she's all alone, all alone. She walks. It's been by this point, it's like been 30 years since she's been out of the bunker. She's walking, never seeing a soul aside from the corpses. Eventually, one day, after walking for, I think, 2 years after leaving the village, is what they called it, behind, she crests a hill and sees a bus. And she kind of runs for it. She gets inside, and it's full of corpses of the guards. There's like 23 of them in there, 24. They're all dead, long dead. But whereas in the bunkers, they'd sort of mummified, these ones are skeletons. She's like, what the hell? What the hell happened here? And, they were just sitting in their seats with their little bags on their laps. So whatever happened, they clearly were not expecting it. And she can't even begin to imagine what happened. And then she kind of, as she'd been wondering before, she kind of starts to wonder, like, maybe the guards had no idea what was going on either. Maybe they were victims as much as the people in the bunkers were. So she goes through their bags and finds some supplies. She finds some bottles of alcohol, which she takes because she remembers Anthena telling her it can be good for wound cleaning. And she finds books in their bags, but in every bag it's the same book. And it's a book about gardening. And, so she takes a book and she buries all the soldiers in a circle, because she's like, if they were as much victims as we were, they deserve a burial too. And she starts walking, like she is getting hopeless. She's like, there's nothing. I'm never going to find anything, and I'm never going to find anybody. And then one day, she finds a configuration of rocks. And she's like, oh my God. So she starts moving the rocks, and then underneath, she finds this big metal lid, essentially. She lifts it, goes down, and it's a home, more or less. It's beautifully decorated. It's got a big comfy bed with lots of cushions and pillows. There's a living room. There's all kinds of dishware. There's a fridge with many, many years worth of food. And that's one thing that's interesting, is throughout all this, and it's brought up a lot, the power in all the bunkers have always stayed on this entire time. The air conditioning continues to work. The fridge, the lights, everything. And they're always like, what is powering this? The seasons are also all very mild. Like, none of what's really happening really makes sense for any place on Earth. It's always gray and cloudy and rains sometimes in certain seasons at night. And back when the other women were still alive, there was one point they were laying on the ground staring up at the stars. And one woman's like, wait a minute. Like, I can't find any of the constellations that I knew from when I was a kid growing up. Like, I don't know that this is the same stars, the same sky that's above planet Earth. So anyway, down in the bunker, she finds this book about, like, I couldn't even pronounce it, but something spacey, space related. And eventually, by the time the child's death starts to near, because eventually she falls ill as well. And she's trying to finish this book that she's writing before she dies. And she's going to stack it up nicely on the table. And maybe one day on this planet that she has also decided is not planet Earth, maybe somebody will come here and find these papers and know her story. And so on the dawn of her final day, because she remembers what the suffering was like for the second woman that died who had cancer, and she's pretty sure she also has cancer. She's like, I'm not doing that anymore. So she sets up, like, she saw that man in the bunker who had the mattresses, so she puts cushions and blankets on each side of her so she can sit up straight and face her end head on. And then she plunges the knife in, And then that's the end of her story. That's it. It was so good. It was so good. I was so moved. There were many times I shed tears. There were, like I said, that ball of anxiety in my throat. There's a passage on page 3. It's when she's looking back on Anthea's death. So that'll come much, much later, but at the beginning of her memoir, she's reflecting on it. She says, "And now, racked with sobs, I was forced to acknowledge too late, much too late, that I too had loved, that I was capable of suffering, and that I was human after all," because of the pain she felt in losing Anthea. It's just such a beautiful story. It's so beautiful. But like I said, we never find out what happened. When they got taken, some of the women have vague recollections of screaming and fires and being tied up, but they can't piece together the details. So they don't know why they were taken, what happened, what was that inciting incident. They don't know where they are. The best they can perhaps imagine is that it's another planet, but they can't understand how that would be or why that would be. So you never know, but that's not the point. That's not the point of the story, And I loved it. Not everyone, do I recommend it? I do, but can I promise you're going to like it? No. You might hate it. But if this sounds interesting, give it a shot. And that is going to do it for me for tonight. For such a short book, this video was much longer than I thought it was going to be. But I thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, leave me a moon or a stars emoji. And I will see you guys again really soon. Bye.